Hey guys, and welcome back to a new video. In this video, we're going to learn about the EditText, which is an important UI component in Android that we use to get the user input. And we have used it before. Again, very briefly, we didn't really get into the different attributes of the EditText, and in this video, we're going to learn about the different customizations that we can add to the EditText. So let's first start with the very basic stuff. So I'll go to the palette again to drop an EditText, and you can find it here under the text, and all of these are considered to be EditText. So let me just drop the plain text one, and here we will just constrain, center it horizontally within the parent, and then add it to the top of the parent. Now let's go to the XML code. And I can see once you drop the EditText, Android Studio will add a couple of attributes that we find very strange. The ems here and the inputType. So what's the ems here? Well, the ems here is not only considered to be an attribute of the EditText, it's actually an attribute of the text view, as the EditText here is extending the text view class. So the ems here is just a measure unit that you can add to your views to measure how many capital M's that your view can hold. So for example, if we just change this to 2 ems, and here you can see that the width of the EditText is decreased. And if you, for example, add 2 ems here instead of the current text, you can see that the EditText is exactly 2 ems in length. So here, for example, if you add another m, you see that it was truncated. So the EditText is not able to show that third m because it doesn't have the enough capacity to show that third m. If you, for example, change it to 3, you can see it once you change it to 3. Now moving to the inputType. So the inputType here is used to determine what type of text the user must input within this EditText. And this could be useful in many ways. The first thing, let's look at the different values for the inputType. And you can see here we have phone, text, person name, number, date time. We also have password here and some other variations of the same attributes. And now if we run, as you can see here, once we click on the EditText and we want to show the keyboard, so you can see it's just a keyboard filled with letters, numbers, symbols, and so on. And if we change from the text person name to, for example, a number or an integer, and now if we run, you can see now that the keyboard is different. So the keyboard is dependent on the value of the inputType. So whatever value you determine for the inputType, the keyboard will show the corresponding keyboard suitable for this inputType. And if we, for example, here add an email, text email address, and we run again, you see a keyboard filled with letters, numbers, and the @ sign along with .com shortcut. You can see here we have the @ sign, numbers, letters, and on some devices it showed the .com shortcut for entering the email address. And lastly, let's try the password and see how the password would look like on the EditText. You can see here we have different variations for the password. We have number password, text password. Choose whatever suits you. In this case, I'm choosing the text password because I want to input a text password. And you can see here the 3 ems are not visible anymore. They are replaced by the dot to hide the password, and whenever you enter anything, it will turn into that dot to hide the user's password. You can also see it here in the preview of the design. It's also not shown. Now, so far we have been providing a text to the EditText, and by default EditTexts are not having any text. Instead, they are having something called a hint, and we have used it also before with the EditText. So hint is just a hint or a text that tells the user what to enter within this EditText. And for example, if you enter username, then username will be shown within the EditText. Let me just delete the ems and make it 0dp for the width to match constraint. You can see that the username here is shown to inform the user what to enter within this EditText. And once you start typing within the EditText, the username or the hint will disappear and the text that the user enters will appear instead of the hint. As you can see here, the username, and once I add anything, the hint is hidden and replaced by the actual text or the actual data of this EditText. Now, sometimes you want to add some icons to your EditText, you want to add some spaces between the parent, for example, or the EditText or the text of the EditText. And here you can add padding for the text. So if I add padding start, you'd see that the username or the hint moves to the right depending on my margin value here. So 16 dp margin, you can see that the text moves, as well as the drawable that we used with the text view. Here you can add, for example, drawable left and maybe face. You can see that the face is added along with the edit text, and we could add drawable padding to just make it more convenient. And here again 16 dp for the drawable padding. Maybe some tint. Let's add some tint or drawable tint. I'll make it kind of gray, same color as the username here. I'll just take the color picker and then drop it on the S here to get that color, and maybe a little bit darker than the username. Now once we run, you can see that the drawable stays there whenever we type something, but the hint is hidden. So if you just open here and start typing, you can see the icon here still there. We also have a very important attribute for the edit text, which we have also used with the text view, which is called the max lines. So the max lines value or the max lines attribute for the edit text by default is 1. So if you, for example, try to type within the edit text, you can see it doesn't go to the next line, its height does not increase. And this is because the default value for the max lines is 1. So you can customize this with the max lines attribute, and you can change that, for example, to 2 lines, maybe 4 lines. And if we run again, let me just delete the input type because it's just a password. You can see it now. If we type, you can see it goes to the next line until the specified value for the max lines here. So it is 4 lines. Actually, it only shows 4 lines and the rest of the text is hidden. However, you can scroll to the rest of the text, go up to the start or go down to the end of the text. Now edit texts are by default enabled, so they are by default editable by the user. You can change this behavior with the enabled attribute, and here you can specify false or true, and whenever the value is false, the user cannot edit this edit text anymore. So instead of just setting it to false here, let's just change that programmatically once we click on a button. So for this, I'm going to add a very quick button here. Drop a button from the palette and add it to the bottom of the edit text, then center it horizontally within the parent, and the ID is button. And now if you go back to the main activity class here, let's add a click listener to the button. So binding.button.sit on click listener, and once we click on a button, we want to disable the edit text, and once you click on it again, we want to enable the edit text. So the ID of the edit text is called EditText person. I'm just going to change it from here to ET, and then go back to the main activity. So here I'm going to refer to the edit text dot enabled, and by default it's enabled. So if it's enabled, I want to make it not enabled, and for this I'm going to copy the same statement and add it to the other side of the equal sign, and finally I'll add the not operator at the end. So here it's enabled, and once we click on the button, it will be enabled not, so not enabled. So now the value is going to be false, and when you click on it again, the value is false, and then we're going to make it true because this is false and the not operator makes it true, so it will be true. Now let's just run, and you can see here it's by default enabled. So if we type something, and now if you click on the button, it will be disabled. You can see its color turns to gray, but you can still type to it because it has some focus. The user clicked on it before disabling it. So in order to resolve this, we can change the input type to null, and the keyboard will not be shown and the user will not be able to type into this edit text. So for this, again, call the et.inputType, and here you can change the input type of the edit text programmatically, and you can do this by calling the input type class, then input type null. You can see we have different types of the input types, similar to the input types that we saw within the XML, like the passwords, the URI, the web password, and so on and so forth. And here, once we click on it, we want to make it null, type null. If you click on it again, we want to make it enabled. So instead of just making it null whenever we click on it again, we have to first check if it's enabled to make the input type as a text, and if it's disabled, we want to make the input type as null. So here we will check this with the if statement. So if binding.et is enabled, we want to make the input type to text. You can see here you can choose the type class text. Now if this is not the case, if it's not enabled, then we want to make the input type null. Now let's run this to check this out. You can see here, if we add ASD, for example, disable the EditText, try to type again, the keyboard is hidden, nothing works because it's disabled. If you click on it again, everything works and the keyboard is shown and you can enter data to the EditText. And now let's have another example with another attribute. So before this, let me just refine our layout to make it more convenient. Here we'll enter a username, and for this button here, I'm just going to say enter, for example, as the text. And now whenever we click on the button, I want to check the text of the EditText. And we have seen before that we can get the text of the EditText with the getText function from Java or the text property syntax from Kotlin. So here I'm going to create a variable called username, which is going to save the text. So again, we will refer to the et.text, and you can see that the text comes from the EditText as editable type, so we have to convert it to a string. And now we want to check if this username here is more than 3 characters, because if it is more than 3 characters, then the user is verified, the user is approved to enter, for example, the next screen. If this is not the case, then we will show an error message to the user. So we'll check this with another variable also to check if the user is verified. So is user verified, and here is going to be username.length is greater than 3. Let me just format this with Ctrl-Alt-L. And now if the user is verified, then we want to show him a toast. And the toast, we have seen it before in the 3rd video where we talked about the activity lifecycle. And it's just a message that pops up and notify the user about certain actions and events. And you can simply create the toast by calling the makeText function from the toast class. And here it takes 3 things. So the context, we said that we're going to talk about it later. For now, let's just pass this, which refers to the main activity, then the text, so approved, and finally the duration, which we can specify by using the toast class again, length short, and finally call the show function to make the toast show to the user. Now if the user is not verified, then in this case we want to display an error message within the EditText, and you can simply do this by referring to the EditText.setError function. You can use the setError function, or alternatively use the error property syntax from Kotlin, and here you add your message. And now if we run again, and here let's just first add a valid username, so ASDF 4 characters, then we will be approved. You can see the toast here. If we, for example, add ASD, only 3 characters, which is not approved, enter, you can see that the error here is shown within the EditText. The username length must have 4 or more. And if we try again to add the F and enter, now the user is approved. And finally, we will implement something called text watcher, which is similar to the onClick listeners that we use with the buttons, as the onClick listeners listen to the button clicks which are invoked by the user. And here for the text watcher or the text change listener, whenever the user changes the text of the edit text or any editable field, then we will be having a callback similar to the setOnClick listener, which is automatically invoked by the system, and it can give us information about the text entered within the edit text on different occasions, like before the text is changed, after the text is changed, or while the text is being changed. So for this, let's implement the text watcher by adding binding.the.et, which is our edit text, .add text change listener. And you can see here we have different variations for the edit text listener or the text change listener. We will use this one for now. And here you can see it takes an instance of the text watcher interface. So the text watcher interface, you have to create a class, then implement that interface, and so on and so forth. So instead of this, we will implement the interface here as an inner class or as an anomalous class rather than an inner class. So to do this, we will add the object keyword, then we add the extend and the implement symbol, which is the colon, and then we add the text watcher interface. And here we have to implement the members. So press Ctrl I to implement the members. Select all of them, click enter. And here, as you can see, we have 3 callbacks which are invoked automatically once we change something on the text. So the first one is before text change, then on text change, and after text change. And you can see all of them pass the editable or the string which is entered within the edit text. So the first 2 are passing char sequence, which is also could be a string. You can convert it easily to a string and you can treat it as a string as well. And the other one, or the last one, returns an editable just like the edit text. So in this example, we would use the last one to check for the error rather than checking the error when we click on the button. So here I will just copy all of this and put it within the after text change callback. Now, as you can see here, it's of type editable, or the text from the edit text is passed as an editable. So we'll have to convert it to a string. So I'll just rename it to a username, then add the toString and then check for its length. And finally, we'll have the same procedure as the is user verified, then create the toast. And as you can see here, we have an error with the toast make text function. So here we are passing this, and this in this scope refers to the text change listener, doesn't refer to the activity. And to make it refer to the activity, we'll have to add the @ sign, then type main activity. And lastly, we'll remove the to-dos here, because if we leave them and we run our application, we would have a crash because we didn't implement those callbacks. So let's just remove the to-dos here, and we will run our application to test this out. So you can see here, once we entered something, the error shows up. And let's, for example, type 3 characters. We still have the error. Now let's type the 4th character, and you can see that the error goes away. So just like a real-time monitor for the text of the edit text, a real-time validation for the text of the edit text, and you could use this in different scenarios. We have infinite numbers of scenarios where this text change listener would be very useful to use. You can also use it to, for example, check if the password has some amount of length, check if the password has some symbols, check if the password has numbers, characters, capital letters, and so on and so forth. You could just think of something that you would create with the text change listener along with the edit text. Now the last thing that I want to show you is that you can add the same background that we use with the buttons and the text views to the edit text, because the edit text is an instance or a child of the text view. So you could add the background that we did with the button, which is called leaf background. You can see here it also applied to the edit text as well as the buttons and the text views. So you can create different robots and customize the edit text as far as you need. So that was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll leave a link to the description below for the documentation of the edit text if you want to learn more about it, if you want to look for different and new attributes of the edit text and try them out in your free time. So thank you for watching, and I hope I see you in the next video.